Some of the heaviest days don't start with a crisis. They start in the quiet moments before your feet even touch the ground. That first breath, that first thought, they silently decide whether you carry peace or chaos into the hours ahead. Buddha taught that with our thoughts we shape the world, and yet most of us shape ours with noise, distraction, and urgency before we've even had a chance to choose differently. It's not weakness, it's conditioning. But what if today could be different? What if the way you rise could become the way you lead your life? If the idea of building mornings that feel calm, powerful, and anchored in true Buddhist journey speaks to you, there's a simple free favor I'll ask. Hit that subscribe button and join this journey with us. And most importantly, don't skip around today. Every part of this video is a step toward transforming the way you move through your life. Let's begin where it all truly starts, within. You wake up and within minutes you can already feel the shape of your entire day. Some mornings carry this subtle, heavy energy, an invisible pressure sitting in your chest before you've even had time to think. It's easy to brush it off, to tell yourself you're just tired, that maybe more coffee will fix it. But deep down, you know it's more than that. It's a signal. In Buddhism, the Buddha often spoke about the seeds we plant in our consciousness, the thoughts we entertain, the emotions we nurture. They don't just vanish, they grow. And mornings are when the soil of your mind is softest, most fertile. What you plant there matters. The problem is most of us start our day without even realizing we're planting seeds of stress, anxiety, and urgency. The alarm rings, and before we've taken a mindful breath, we reach for our phones, our to-do lists, our worries. Buddha taught that the mind is everything. What you think, you become. So if the first thing you feed your mind is chaos, what do you expect it will create for you? It's not just a bad habit. It's the silent architect of how we live our days and eventually, how we live our lives. And here's the catch. Because it happens so quietly, so automatically, we don't even recognize the damage. We normalize it. We call it being busy or getting ahead. But underneath that hustle is a deep misalignment. The Buddha warned against being swept away by the currents of the unconscious mind, likening it to a traveler caught in a raging river, helpless to its pull. If we don't pause, if we don't set our course with intention, the day sweeps us up before we've even had the chance to choose how we want to live. Most people don't even notice it happening. One minute you're waking up and the next you're already lost. Thinking about deadlines, answering messages, worrying about things you can't control. It happens so fast, so quietly, that it feels normal. But Buddhism teaches us that the greatest suffering often comes not from huge disasters, but from these tiny, unconscious moments where we surrender our minds without even realizing it. The Buddha compared it to a person being caught in a net. The more you struggle without awareness, the tighter it wraps around you. When you wake up straight into survival mode, rushing, reacting, reaching for distractions, you're not just having a busy morning, you're setting a blueprint for your entire day. And once that tone is set, it's incredibly hard to change. You spend the day feeling like you're chasing something you can never quite catch. You react to every little inconvenience like it's a crisis. Your mind feels fragmented, your energy scattered, your patience worn thin by noon. It's not because you're weak or undisciplined, it's because your mind was never given a clear path to walk in the first place. Buddha often emphasized the power of beginning well, of setting intentions before action. Without mindfulness, he said, we are like leaves blown helplessly by the wind. A morning without consciousness becomes a day lived in reaction, not creation. And over time, those days stack up until you barely recognize the life you're living. You're exhausted, not because you're doing too much, but because you're constantly pulled in 1,000 invisible directions that you never consciously chose. Somewhere along the way, we started believing that feeling constantly stressed was just part of being alive. We wear it like a badge of honor, calling it ambition, calling it being responsible, calling it life. But Buddha's teachings remind us that just because something feels common doesn't mean it's natural, and it certainly doesn't mean it's healthy. Stress, anxiety, overwhelm, these are not the signs of a life well lived. They are symptoms of misalignment between how we're living and what our souls are quietly asking for. Think about it. Would you tell a fish struggling to breathe on land that it's just part of the grind? Of course not. Yet that's exactly what we do to ourselves. We treat spiritual suffocation as normal. The Buddha taught that the first noble truth is the existence of suffering, but he didn't stop there. He showed us that suffering has causes, and because it has causes, it can also be ended. The stress we normalize isn't our destiny. It's simply a reflection of patterns that can be changed. But if we don't slow down to notice, we start believing that this is just the way life is. That running on empty is strength. That having no time for yourself is success. That ignoring your own needs is noble. And here's the silent tragedy. When we normalize stress, we lose our sensitivity to life's beauty. We become too busy to notice the sunlight on the floor, the taste of our morning tea, the quiet miracles unfolding around us. Buddhism teaches that mindfulness is the antidote, awakening to the present moment with full awareness, free from habitual distortion. The truth most of us don't admit. We're not waking up like warriors, we're waking up like warriors. We hit snooze not because we're lazy, but because somewhere deep inside, we're already dreading the chaos that's waiting for us. We roll over and grab our phones, letting other people's demands, dramas and distractions flood our minds before we've even said good morning to ourselves. And by the time we sit up, the day already feels like it's slipping through our fingers. Buddhism teaches that the mind, when left untrained, will naturally chase after craving and fear. And that's exactly what happens when our mornings have no anchor. We don't scroll because it's making us stronger. We scroll because it's the easiest way to delay facing the discomfort of starting. We don't dive into the day because we're full of energy. We drag ourselves half alive, wondering why everything feels heavier than it should. Buddha described this restless human condition as dukkha, a sense of unease, dissatisfaction that follows us when our lives lack mindfulness and intention. And what better example of that quiet suffering than the way most of us begin our mornings? No one taught us that the first few minutes after waking are sacred. No one told us that the first thoughts we entertain would shape our entire emotional landscape for the day. Instead, we learned to survive our mornings barely frantically rather than to lead them. And the more we repeat this pattern, the more it hardens into a belief that mornings are battles, not beginnings, that life is something to be endured, not embraced. Think about it for a second. Would you pour muddy water into the engine of a car you loved? Would you expect it to run smoothly, to carry you safely to your destination? Of course not. Yet that's exactly what we do with our minds every morning when we feed them noise, distraction, and panic instead of peace. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a field. Whatever seeds you plant will grow. If you plant seeds of fear, urgency, and disconnection first thing in the morning, you shouldn't be surprised when the day blooms into anxiety and exhaustion. When you jump straight into your messages, your worries, your endless to-do lists before you've even had a real breath, you're not getting ahead. You're filling your system with dirty fuel. You're setting yourself up for mental sputtering, emotional heaviness, and spiritual disconnection. It doesn't matter how motivated you are, how talented you are, how much you want to crush the day. If you start with the wrong energy, you're fighting an uphill battle before you even leave your bedroom. In Buddhism, there's a deep respect for beginnings, the first breath of meditation, the first mindful step, the first thought upon waking. These are seen as powerful doorways, not afterthoughts. Buddha often spoke about right intention as the beginning of the path to enlightenment. Without setting a clear, conscious intention, our minds will default to old habits, like water flowing into the easiest grooves. And those old grooves, stress, fear, distraction, are deep unless we actively choose otherwise. The beautiful part: you don't need to overhaul your entire life to change your mornings. You don't need to become a monk or live in silence to reclaim your mind. You're only a few simple, deliberate choices away from pouring clean, powerful energy into your system. A few small rituals: breathing before checking your phone, setting a clear focus for your day, offering gratitude before stepping into action, can transform everything. They act like pure fuel, lighting up your mind with clarity instead of clutter. We spend so much of our lives trying to run from chaos. We treat it like the enemy, as if the goal of life is to avoid every bump, every hard moment, every unpredictable twist. But the Buddha taught something profoundly different. He said, "Chaos is inherent in all compounded things. Strive on with diligence." In other words, life's messiness isn't the mistake, it's the curriculum. The chaos you feel in your rushed mornings, the overwhelm pressing into your chest, that's not a punishment. It's an invitation. Every moment of disarray is pointing you somewhere. It's a mirror, reflecting the parts of you that are asking for attention, asking for realignment. The noise in your head, the pressure in your heart, the scattered energy, they're not random. They are signals that you've drifted away from presence, from intention, from the grounded wisdom that Buddhism so often brings us back to. We usually think that peace comes from getting rid of chaos, but real peace, the kind that lasts, comes from learning to move through chaos without being swallowed by it. Buddha taught that the mind, when disciplined and aware, can remain still like a deep lake, even if winds whip across its surface. That image has always stayed with me. It means you don't have to wait for your mornings, your inbox, your world to be perfectly calm before you claim your calmness. You create your peace within, despite the noise. When you feel that frantic energy first thing in the morning, instead of trying to outrun it, what if you treated it like a teacher? What if you saw it as a gentle nudge, saying, pause, breathe, reclaim yourself? The chaos isn't here to defeat you, it's here to train you. It's here to show you that even in disorder you can choose stillness. Even in noise, you can choose clarity. It's easy to think that mornings are just about getting ready, getting dressed, getting out the door, getting to work. But Buddhism teaches us something much deeper. Mornings are not about getting. They are about being. They are about setting the inner tone that quietly shapes everything else you touch. The Buddha said, "All that we are is the result of what we have thought. The mind is everything." And what is the very first thought you offer yourself in the morning? That's not a small thing, it's the foundation. The energy you wake up with, the quality of your very first breath, your first words to yourself, your first internal dialogue, becomes the emotional current you ride all day long. If that first moment is soaked in panic, urgency, or dread, then even the small things will feel heavy. Even the easy conversations will carry a weight. But if you plant mindfulness, if you breathe in a calm awareness, if you greet the morning with presence instead of panic, everything softens. The road becomes easier, not because the world changed, but because you changed. In Buddhist practice, the concept of right view, seeing things clearly, is at the heart of everything. And mornings are when your view is most fragile, most easily shaped. It's like wet cement. You have a chance to impress your intentions deeply, before the noise of the world hardens them into something you didn't choose. What you allow into your mind in those first sacred minutes becomes the frame through which you experience your entire day. The mind is deeply suggestible when it first wakes. Studies echo what Buddhism has taught for centuries. Your early morning state is almost like a meditative trance. a space where seeds grow effortlessly. So if you plant stress, stress multiplies. If you plant peace, peace blooms. And the best part? You don't need an hour-long ritual. Even a single moment where you place your hand over your heart, breathe in deeply and set a clear, kind intention can change everything. The alarm clock doesn't just wake up your body, it wakes up your choices. In that quiet, blurry moment between sleep and full awareness, you stand at your first real crossroads of the day. Buddhism teaches that every moment holds the seed of awakening, and that first moment, right when your eyes blink open, is more powerful than most of us ever realize. It's where your mind asks, will I lead today, or will I be led? If your first instinct is to reach for your phone, dive into notifications, check messages you didn't even know you were dreading, then without meaning to, you hand the keys of your mind to the world. You let other people's thoughts, emergencies, and noise set your emotional temperature. The Buddha warned against letting the mind be dragged by external things, comparing it to a restless ox pulled this way and that. Without mindfulness, you become like that ox, moving not because you chose the path, but because you were yanked onto it. But there's another way. In that first fragile space between dreams and duties, you can pause, you can breathe, you can choose to hear your own heart before the world starts shouting. You can stretch your body slowly and thank it for carrying you through another night. You can sit for a minute and ask yourself a powerful question. What kind of energy do I want to bring into this day? That single moment of inward listening is not small. It's revolutionary. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a garden. If you do not cultivate it with care, weeds will grow on their own. Your morning is your first act of cultivation. Will you pull the weeds of fear, distraction, and doubt, or will you water seeds of patience, clarity, and compassion? The choice is yours, but it's a choice that must be made deliberately, or it will be made for you. Without a clear direction, even the strongest winds can't carry you to where you want to go. Buddhism teaches that intention is the starting point of all journeys. It's like a compass planted inside the heart. And nowhere is this more crucial than in the first few minutes after you wake. If you don't consciously set your internal compass, the world will hand you one. It will flood you with urgency, fear, distractions, and your mind, being open and vulnerable, will follow wherever it's pushed. Those first few moments of consciousness are powerful. Scientists and Buddhist monks alike understand that the brain is incredibly suggestible when waking, like soft clay, easily molded. Whatever emotional state you touch first, stress, gratitude, fear, peace, it sets the background music for the whole day. You're not just waking up, you're tuning the instrument you will play for the next 16 hours. That's why Buddha spoke so often about samma sankappa, right intention. It's about deliberately choosing the thoughts you want to guide you before the outer world clouds your mind. It's the simple but profound act of asking yourself, how do I want to move through today? What do I want to embody? Not in a rushed, demanding way, but with gentle mindfulness. You don't need a complicated script. You don't need to force yourself into unrealistic optimism. You just need to plant a clear, living intention into your heart. Maybe it's something simple. Today I meet challenges with calm. Or today I move from compassion, not fear. Or even, today I stay true to my own path no matter what noise surrounds me. This is your inner compass, subtle but strong, and it quietly shapes how you interpret everything that follows. It's easy to believe that change only happens through big, dramatic gestures, new jobs, big moves, grand resolutions. But Buddhism teaches us something far more profound. Real transformation is found in the small, almost invisible choices we make every single day, and nowhere is that more true than in your morning rituals. You don't need to move mountains to change your life. You just need to move your heart a little bit every morning. In Buddhist practice, rituals aren't meaningless routines, they're sacred anchors. Lighting incense, bowing, offering a cup of tea, these simple acts are infused with mindfulness, intention, presence. They are reminders to come back to what matters most. Your morning can be the same. You don't need an elaborate checklist or a perfect Instagram-worthy routine. You need a few quiet acts that ground you, that reminds you, I am here, I am awake, I am choosing how I will show up today. Maybe for you, it's placing your bare feet on the floor and feeling gratitude for another day of breath. Maybe it's 3 deep, conscious breaths before you look at any screen. Maybe it's writing down one word that captures your focus for the day: patience, courage, kindness. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be yours. Small rituals create sacred space in the ordinary rush of life. They are tiny doorways into the peace you are always seeking. Buddha taught that mindfulness must be woven into every part of our lives, not just our meditations, but our walking, eating, breathing. Morning rituals are how you begin that weaving. They turn waking up from a mechanical act into a spiritual beginning, and slowly, day by day, they retrain your mind to respond with presence instead of panic, with clarity instead of confusion. And there's something about those first few minutes after you wake up that feels different from any other time of the day. Before the demands start pulling at you, before the outside world floods your senses, there's this brief sacred window. Buddhism teaches that the space between moments, the pauses, the silences, is where true awareness is born. Your morning silence is not empty, it's full of potential. It's the opening of the path you will walk today. But most of us rush past it. We reach for the noise, we fill that silence with news, texts, scrolling, plugging into other people's realities before we've even said hello to our own souls. And when we skip over that sacred space, we wonder why by noon we feel drained, disconnected, overwhelmed. The Buddha said, "Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life." Your morning silence is that fire. It's where you reconnect to yourself before the day asks you to give yourself away. What if instead of rushing through those first few minutes, you treated them like a ritual? What if you honored them as the most important appointment of your day? It doesn't need to be complicated. Maybe you sit in bed for 1 minute and feel your breath moving in and out. Maybe you stretch your body gently and thank it for carrying you. Maybe you simply place your hands together and set one quiet intention. Today, I choose peace. In Buddhist practice, monks often greet the morning with a bow to the rising sun, not as worship, but as deep gratitude for another day of awakening. You can do the same in your own way. You can honor the miracle of being here, alive, breathing, choosing. That first moment is yours. Before the world starts asking for pieces of you, protect it, celebrate it, use it to anchor yourself in presence. Most mornings, the world reaches for us before we've even fully arrived in ourselves. The buzzing notifications, the flood of obligations, the endless noise, it all comes rushing in before we've taken a single intentional breath. Buddhism teaches that the greatest strength isn't found in controlling the outer world, it's found in mastering our inner one. The Buddha reminded us, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Yet how often do we give it away to everyone else before offering even a moment of it to ourselves? That's why the way you respond in the very first minutes matters so much. Before you answer emails, before you return texts, before you worry about how others will see you, you have a sacred duty to respond to yourself, to hear your own heart, to tend to your own mind. Just like a gardener must water the roots before expecting the tree to bear fruit, You must nourish your spirit before you can truly offer anything meaningful to the world. Marcus Aurelius, influenced by Buddhist-like Stoic ideals, would remind himself each morning, expect disorder, expect frustration, expect chaos, but know that these things cannot disturb the calm you cultivate inside. In the same way, Buddha taught that external conditions are ever-changing, but the mind, when properly trained, can remain untouched, like a clear, still pond. So what does it look like to respond to yourself first? It's simple. It's sitting quietly with your own breath before rushing into someone else's urgency. It's listening inward before the world speaks outward. It's asking, how am I really feeling, and meeting that truth with compassion, not judgment. It's placing a hand on your chest and saying, before I give my energy away, I fill my own well. There's a silent truth most people never realize. Your mind is always being trained, whether you mean to or not. Every thought, every reaction, every tiny habit, it's all shaping the way you see the world. Buddhism teaches this beautifully. All experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Your mind is not a fixed thing. It's clay, soft and shapeable, especially in the early hours of the day. The way you start your morning lays down the blueprint for how your mind will operate, not just for the day, but eventually for your entire life. We think we're just checking our phones, we're just getting a head start. But every morning you rush, panic, or numb out, you teach your brain that urgency and distraction are your natural states. And like a river carving into stone, those patterns deepen over time. Before you know it, anxiety isn't just a mood, it's your home. Restlessness isn't just a phase, it's your normal. That's how unconscious conditioning works. And the scariest part? It feels invisible, it feels automatic, it feels like fate. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The Buddha taught the same principle thousands of years earlier. The untamed mind will drift into suffering without even knowing it. If you don't choose the way you want your mind to be shaped in the morning, the world will choose for you, and it almost always chooses fear, urgency, and distraction. But here's the beauty. You can reclaim that power. You can train your mind deliberately. The first few minutes of your day are like writing instructions into a computer's code. If you start with clarity, with stillness, with conscious gratitude, you're not just having a good morning. You're rewiring your mind to move through life with peace instead of panic. Most of us are running, and not just through traffic, schedules, or endless to-do lists. We're running from ourselves, from the quiet, from the uncomfortable truths that rise up when the world goes silent. Buddha spoke often of the restless mind, calling it like a monkey swinging from branch to branch, always chasing, always avoiding. And the morning, that fragile moment between sleep and wakefulness, is often when that chase begins all over again. It's tempting to grab your phone, to fill the stillness with noise, to distract yourself before the deeper parts of you can even surface. But Buddhism invites a different way. It reminds us that liberation doesn't come from running faster. It comes from stopping, from turning toward your soul instead of away from it. The very things you're trying to outrun, your fears, your doubts, your hopes, your hidden dreams, those are not your enemies. They are your gateways to awakening. When you face yourself first thing in the morning, when you sit even for a minute with no distractions, you are stepping into the rarest kind of courage. The Buddha taught that self-awareness is the foundation of wisdom. Without it, we keep repeating the same patterns, the same pain over and over. But when you dare to sit with the silence, when you dare to meet whatever rises without judgment, you break the cycle. You stop living on autopilot and begin living with intention. It doesn't have to be grand. Maybe you sit up in bed and simply notice your breath. Maybe you greet whatever feeling is present, tiredness, sadness, hope, excitement, with gentle acceptance, no fighting, no fleeing, just being. Buddhism reminds us that enlightenment isn't some distant, dramatic event. It's found in these small, courageous acts of presence. Most people wait for the feeling of readiness to wash over them, like a wave lifting them into motion. But Buddhism teaches something very different. The Buddha showed that right action precedes right feeling. Waiting for the perfect moment is a trick of the restless mind. It's not about waiting, it's about moving first, gently but deliberately. Your mind doesn't clear before you act. It clears because you act. The truth is, your body leads your mind far more often than you realize. Think about it. When you stretch after lying still, your breath deepens, your heart steadies, your mind sharpens. When you take a mindful step outside, even if you felt heavy before, your spirit lifts. The Buddha compared the mind to a cart being pulled by oxen, the body being the lead. If the oxen move calmly and with purpose, the cart follows. Action, even the smallest kind, is how you train the restless oxen of your mind. So many of us delay. We tell ourselves, "I'll move when I feel motivated." But Buddhism reminds us, motivation is not the fire that starts the engine. It's the smoke that rises once the engine is already burning. You start the fire by moving first, one slow stretch, one mindful sip of water, one small prayer of gratitude whispered into the morning air. You don't need grand, heroic action. You need a flicker, a first step. And what happens is almost magical. Once you move with even a tiny sliver of intention, your mind begins to shift. The fog starts to lift. Doubt loses its grip. The inertia that felt so heavy starts dissolving. Suddenly, what felt impossible an hour ago becomes something you can reach out and touch. Not because the mountain shrank, but because your mind grew stronger. We tend to believe that we need to feel ready before we act, that we need to wait for courage, clarity, or inspiration to flood us first. But Buddha's teachings point to a much deeper truth. Feeling follows motion. Emotion follows action. You don't wait for the right mood to live wisely. You move your body, and the mind will awaken to meet you. Think about it. When you sit still too long, your mind often spirals. Doubt creeps in. Fear exaggerates itself. Small tasks begin to look like mountains. But when you simply get up, stretch, breathe deeply, or take that first mindful step, something inside you shifts. The Buddha compared the untrained mind to a flame flickering in the wind, unstable, scattered. But movement, intentional and steady, acts like a shield from that wind. It grounds you, it focuses you. It reminds you that you are not your passing feelings. You are the one who moves through them. This is why motion is so powerful first thing in the morning. Before your mind has a chance to flood you with excuses, move. Before fear whispers all the reasons you should stay in bed, stretch. Before doubt draws pictures of failure, step forward anyway. The Buddha taught that a disciplined mind brings happiness, and discipline starts with the smallest choices made with awareness, especially when they're difficult. You don't need to run a marathon at dawn. You don't need to force anything harsh. It's about the simple act of initiating, showing your mind through movement that you are awake, present, and in charge. Maybe it's a few deep breaths with your feet planted firmly on the floor. Maybe it's walking slowly to the window and greeting the morning light with gratitude. Maybe it's one mindful stretch that shakes the sleep from your bones. These small movements create waves far bigger than they seem. Some mornings there's a task that already weighs on your mind before you even get out of bed. You know the one. It lingers like a heavy cloud. An important call you need to make, a difficult decision you've been avoiding, a project that feels just a little too big to tackle right now. And the easiest thing in the world is to push it aside, to tell yourself, later, after I'm more awake, after I've done some easier things first. But Buddha's teachings offer a different wisdom. True liberation doesn't come from avoiding discomfort. It comes from facing it with an open and steady heart. The Buddha taught that suffering often grows not from the event itself, but from the resistance we build around it. The more we delay what feels uncomfortable, the bigger and scarier it becomes in our minds. Avoidance is like watering a seed of fear. Every time we turn away, it quietly grows stronger. But when we move toward the hard thing with mindfulness, we shrink its power over us. We stop the cycle of fear before it can root itself deeper. There's a certain magic that happens when you do the hardest thing first. It's not just about productivity, it's about freeing your mind. Tackling the biggest challenge early in the day clears a massive weight off your chest. It makes everything that follows feel lighter. It reminds you that you are capable, that you can move through fear instead of being paralyzed by it. In Buddhism, this practice is called right effort, the steady, courageous energy we bring to actions that align with our deepest growth, even when they feel hard. It's easy to believe that comfort is the goal, that if we could just make life smooth enough, easy enough, painless enough, we would finally be happy. But Buddhism teaches something very different. Real happiness, real growth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from facing life fully, even when it stretches us beyond what feels easy. The Buddha left behind a palace full of comfort to sit under the Bodhi tree, to wrestle with suffering and discover a deeper truth. If comfort led to peace, he would have stayed surrounded by luxury. But he knew better. He knew that comfort, if clung to blindly, becomes a silent trap. When we protect ourselves too much from discomfort, we start losing something precious. We lose our resilience, we lose our edge. We become fragile in ways we don't even notice until life tests us, and life will always test us. Buddhism reminds us that everything in life is impermanent. Comfort is fleeting. Seasons change, people change, bodies change. And if we've spent our whole lives seeking only what feels easy, we're left unprepared when the inevitable storms arrive. But here's the good news. You don't need chaos to grow. You don't need your life to fall apart to become strong. You just need to practice leaning into chosen discomfort, little by little, on purpose. Maybe it's waking up a little earlier than you want to. Maybe it's choosing silence instead of mindless scrolling. Maybe it's finishing a task you've been avoiding, even when every part of you wants to procrastinate. These small, conscious challenges build the inner muscles that help you stand strong when life gets heavy. Gratitude often gets treated like a soft, extra thing, something you practice when life is going well, when everything feels easy. But in Buddhism, gratitude is not optional. It's not decoration. It's the foundation. The Buddha taught that a grateful heart is fertile ground for wisdom, peace, and compassion to grow. Gratitude isn't just something you feel when life hands you gifts. It's something you choose, especially when life feels heavy. And here's the thing. The more chaotic your world feels, the more urgently you need gratitude. Because gratitude doesn't erase hardship. It doesn't deny pain. What it does is change the lens through which you see everything. It reminds you that even inside difficulty, there are still reasons to stay open, still reasons to keep breathing, still reasons to love. Buddha's path was not a path of pretending everything was fine. He saw clearly the reality of aging, sickness, and death. But he also saw clearly the incredible, precious beauty of each breath, each sunrise, each moment of kindness. He taught that we suffer not just because life is painful, but because we forget to notice the blessings still woven into the pain. That's why beginning your morning with gratitude is so powerful. It's not a cliche, it's training, it's armor, it's remembering, before anything else, that you are here, that you are breathing, that no matter what challenges this day brings, you are alive, awake, and capable of meeting them. Most people don't realize it, but the way you step into your morning is the way you step into your life. Your day isn't just something that happens to you, it's something you create, moment by moment, choice by choice. Buddha taught that our lives are shaped by our minds, that every action, every word, every breath arises from intention, whether we are conscious of it or not. And the morning is when your intention is at its purest, most powerful, before the noise of the world clouds your inner sky. You are not powerless when you wake up. You are standing at a threshold, and what you do in those first moments, whether you drift into the old habits of unconsciousness or whether you rise with mindfulness, sets the tone not just for your day, but for your life. It's not about having a perfect schedule or squeezing productivity out of every minute. It's about living awake, about moving through your hours with the same reverence and attention that a monk brings to a simple cup of tea. Designing your day with mindfulness means stepping into it on purpose. It means pausing before the rush. It means asking yourself, what kind of energy do I want to move with? What values do I want to embody today? It means setting even the smallest actions, like brushing your teeth, preparing your breakfast, walking to your car, as acts of conscious living, not rushed survival. The Buddha often spoke of walking the middle path, not a life of extreme denial, nor a life of mindless indulgence, but a life of deliberate balance. Designing your day with mindfulness is walking that middle path. It's making space for your spirit even inside your busy schedule. It's choosing, again and again, to return to presence no matter how many times the world tries to pull you away. Before you rush into the next thing today, take one moment to remember this. Peace is not something you find at the end of a perfect day. It's something you choose, breath by breath, from the very first moment you rise. Thank you for being part of Buddhist Journey, for choosing presence over chaos, and for walking this path of mindful living with us. If today's message spoke to your heart, stay with us. Watch one of the suggested videos on the screen. There's more wisdom waiting for you, just one step deeper into the life you're meant to live.